Welcome everybody to another observability lab. Today, as you can see here, we talk about how can you get notified in case Dynatrace detects any anomalies in your system. And I couldn't have found a better person than the product manager that is driving this innovation, Sonja. Servus.
Hi, Andy.
Hi. Hey, Sonja, thank you so much. This is going to be part one of a video series where we want to talk about how our users can not only get notified, but that's the first step, but as a next step also, how we can build smart agentic automation to also hopefully remediate some of these problems and never get notified in a way where we have to jump into. But I think the first one is really people are asking us, how do I get notified when Dynatrace detects an issue? And I want to learn from you what are some of the best practices, how to get started.
Sure, let's do that. So first, I want to go back to the basics and have a mental picture for all of us because I find that always helps to understand what we're doing, where are the things, and what are we talking about. So one very short slides, and then we are going to jump over to a demo and look into what this means into the product. But as a general understanding of how alerting and notification works in Dynatrace. We have all kind of alert configurations. Some are automatic, coming from the domain apps, for example, baseline for services that is automatically calculated, and that we know, oh, this is how your service behave, but somehow something changes, and Dynatrace can automatically trigger alert for that. But that can also be configured to have different thresholds. We have also custom alert with anomaly detection, or we have also additional way of configuring alerting to open pipeline to create device events. So we can see all that in a big category of how do I configure my alerts. Once the alert fires, an alert instance is created. And in Dynatrace, those alert instances are called device events. And if you like Dynatrace DQL, you can always look at them by calling the query fetch DT device events. This is a view, and you see all the alerts instances that have been triggered. Now, because we know that sometimes when something happens, that something goes wrong, it's not only one alert that triggers, but it can be 10,000, hundreds of alerts that are triggered. And we don't want to get notification for all of them. So what Dynatrace does in a very clever way is we have this concept of problems that look at all the alerts and put them together, the one that belong together, and analyze the topology and the relationship with Dynatrace intelligence that we get on one container, the problem that contain all those different alerts. And again, if you like DQL, you can see all those problems that are created, of course, in the problem app first. So that will be for daily user. But if you're a bit curious to look at the data, it will be the DQL query fetch DT device problems. I think it's always helpful to see, okay, what kind of data are generated, especially when working with notifications. So you have that problem, and now it's always the question, which problem are you interested into and what do you want to do? So a first step in the automation journey is to get a notification that a problem is happening. And this is what we are going to look at more in details today. But it could be also that you want to react to a problem by starting an auto remediation. And in both cases, notification or automation workflow is the tool for that in Dynatrace. So in a workflow, you can define which are the problems that you are interested in. And this which you are interested in, it could mean from your team, from a specific Kubernetes cluster, from a certain category of problems. So it's you that define which are the problems that make sense for you. In large environments, you are not responsible for everything. So you want to make sure that you get only notified for the things that are relevant to you. And in the workflow, you define which problem you are interested in, and you define what happens. So it could be a very simple things that just sending a notification to Slack or to Microsoft Teams or per email. But again, it could be a much more complex workflow that helps you to do already some auto remediation and automatic escalation and using agentic step, but that's for another time.
Really cool. Sonja, I really love that overview. And just to recap, if I understand this correctly, let's assume I'm a development team. I am interested in getting alerted when a particular log message comes in. So I could, for instance, define an open pipeline extraction rule that say when a particular log message comes in that is relevant, please alert me. Now, in your case, and this is the beauty of what you explained here, Davis or Dynatrace Intelligence is not just firing on every single Davis event or an alert instance. It also understands maybe at the same time we have an anomaly in failure rate, in response time, in CPU. So Dynatrace is smart enough to figure out that these individual alert instances belong to the same problem. And then I can say, I'm now interested in doing something with this problem. Today we're focusing on notifying people, but as you also correctly highlighted here, I really also like the way that we're following up with another video on using workflows to also trigger smart remediation, to use some of our agentic workflows that are coming soon. Don't want to spoil the beans here, but this is really cool. I love this overview. Really cool.
Great. So, but we like overview, but we prefer working with the product, right? So let's take a look at what this means into the product. So here I'm into the problem apps. This is the place where you go, where you see which problems are active or look at problem in the past. And usually, if you want to look at the problem that are relevant to you, you can use filters. You can use, for example, categories. Is it type availability, error, slowdown? And you can add some filter criterion that are relevant to you. So for example, here I have selected the cluster to say, let's take a look at all the problems that are in that cluster. And that would be, for example, an example of the problems that I'm interested in, that I'd like to have to notify on. So I'm going to go to the workflow app. And I'm going to create a new workflow. Now you are going to see a list of templates, but let's start with a blank workflow just to make sure that we get the basic right. And then we're going to look at templates and how they can make our life easier. So what is a workflow? A workflow is a combination of a trigger, and we have different kind of trigger. For problem, for reacting on a problem, we are going to use the problem trigger. And here, again, I can use some of the similar filter that we have been looking at in the problem app. So I have first the event state. I can say I want to get to run that workflow only when the problem is active for the first time, or when it's active and closed. So for example, if you want to get a notification when it starts the problems and when it's closed to know, okay, I don't have to do anything more, you can use that, or you can select when it triggers. And then you have the event category, as we have been looking at. You have availability, custom, so all the same category. And then what I really like about the trigger that we have is you can query past events and kind of get a feeling of how many notifications or how often that workflow would trigger. So we have here on a demo environment that has lots of data. So you would see, 90 in the last hour, that would be a lot for notification. So it's always a good sign, a good idea to look here at the volume that would be sent. And of course, here it's globally for all the problems, but you might want to add some additional filter. And here I could do something like, just a second, I'll prepare it to not have to type it. I could do something like a match values to say, okay, I want to have only the problem where Kubernetes cluster name was that cluster. So that would be an example. In the future, on that environment, I don't have any in the last 7 days, but that would be an example of a filter that you could do. We are going to add more and more other out-of-the-box filter to make it a bit easier for user to get started. But anything can be done with the custom filter, and that will always be possible as a backup. And here we see when we have an event found, we see what kind of event. So this is the data that is available in the workflow. So a workflow is a trigger. When does this workflow start is triggered. And then you can add different tasks. And the task is we have, you can select from a large catalog of action that we have. If you're using Slack, you can use Slack. If you're using Teams, so let's look at things like Slack and Teams and email in this session. But you could do here much more and add much more complicated tasks and detection. And this is where we would go into the next part of a tutorial to explain more on more advanced use case. One very, very important thing here is when you get started, you have here, the workflow is a simple workflow. The simple workflow only have one task. If you add more, it would change the type to standard workflow. And simple workflow have been created for simple notification use case. They also don't require workflow hours or licensing for workflow. So this is why the recommendation for simple notification use case is to use simple workflow.
So basically that means they are for free. You can set them up and they just trigger. That's cool. Simple workflows.
Yeah. Simple workflows. And before we look at the action, at what we can do in, for example, a Slack channel, one very important settings that you will see here. So here I have the workflow options, and you see I'm the owner, and also the actor, I'm the actor. And that means that's the user that is used to run the workflow. Every time the workflow will run, it will run in the context of a specific user. If you are trying it out, it's fine to use your own actor. You have to remember the problem trigger will act on your behalf. So it means it will only see the problems that you see. And if you have different permissions, you might miss something, or if things change. So that's something that when in production, we would recommend to use a service user that has a well-defined set of permissions.
Now that's a good best practice, because obviously behind every user, behind every actor, there's a permission system, not just what you can do in the platform, but also what data you're allowed to see. And to your point, right, if you set something up, let's say as a central team, then you want to use a service account that has enough privileges. If you want to set this up for a particular team, then maybe you have a service account for that particular team with their privileges to only see their data.
Yeah, and if somebody changed team, then you would have troubles with the automation. So it's really, really important for things that run in production to make sure that you have a service user.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. And here, so this is an example for Slack, and you can define a connection. So I'm not going to show that in details. We have lots of documentation on that. This is how you connect to connect to Slack. You need to create a connection that can be reused by different workflow, and you can add some information. Now, maybe the thing that you will see at that point is, I have to write the message by myself. So when you start from scratch, you are really free. You have the whole freedom, and you can write exactly the message that you want to use. So you can write hello, or maybe attention, there is a problem. And now you might want to add placeholder. And what's great about the workflow system is we have a system of adding placeholders. So you will see this is all the information that I got from the problem trigger. Here you see trigger. So I have the event, this is the problem, and then I can reference every properties that are on it. So one typical thing is the display ID, that's the problem ID that is visible in the app. And I can click on preview and see, okay, this is how it would have looked. So this is, I just wanted to show how that works, because that's very flexible. But you are probably going to tell me that's really cumbersome to have to come up with what is the right title and how to put the message out there. And this is why we have been working on providing workflow templates. And now I'm going to switch over to workflow templates. So let's create a new one. Don't save that one. I'm going to create a new workflow. And here you can see, and this is something, now I'm showing you something that is on a demo environment. It's going to be live very soon, the whole collection of templates, and this is going to grow and grow even more. So if you are watching this video and take a look at your environment, because you'll see which templates are available so far. But also, if you have a request for a template, you think, I'm always doing the kind of same task with workflow, that's very cumbersome. Or I have a super great example that would be helpful for a lot of people. Please go to the community, the Dynatrace community, and share it with us or ask us for new templates that will help you get started much quicker. Now I'm going to take the email one. So I can select templates. The apps are the one are delivering the templates, a bit like ready-made documents. We have now the workflow templates as additional concept. And here I've selected email, and I see, there's a couple of one, and this is what I need. This is the email notification for problem. First, we have a check. If it contains links or reference to other apps that you might not have, you get the possibility to have a link and install them. In that case, it only uses the email app, which is already installed on all environments. So I click on Create Workflow. And here I have it. I have already a task with emails that is pre-filled with best practices. So we see, okay, the content here is already prepared for you. The message is already prepared with everything that you might need. But I can still have a chance to update it and to add additional information. And what you will see also with those templates is most of them, they come with a guide that helps you to understand, okay, what can I do? What do I need to change? So you see, okay, what trigger is it using? Where do I need to configure the email? So here it's probably the most important. I can click here. I can click here. And then it's changed automatically and bring me to the right place where I can put my email address.
Cool. So that means that obviously this is new functionality, which is super helpful, especially with the guide. It looks like a great way to document how to use the template and also guides the user through every single step with the links that gets you directly to the correct settings. That's very convenient.
Exactly. And the template is pre-filled, so you don't have to, for most basic, think what kind of message do I want there, but you still get something nice to get started. You can update it as we know that notifications is very personal. People want to have sometimes more, sometimes less, so you're totally flexible, but you get something to get started with that is already ready and that you can expand on. The guide, you can always minimize it, so it's not in the way, and you can bring it back, but you could also remove it from your own templates that you have created. Yeah. Now I want to open one that I have already configured, but I don't want to show you my email address. So here, what I have done, the trigger is very, very open. So if you see query past event, you'll see again, it's too much. But I'm just using it for the demo. And actually, I have disabled it so that I don't get lots of thousands of email while we are showing that. What I wanted to show you is how to test it. You can always test it using the Run button. And you will see, okay, this is the events that the workflow engine has selected for you to try it out with. So it's using an event, the last event from the past that match your filter. It shows it to you. And you can say, okay, run. And then it will run the workflow. And then you will see, okay, it's running, it's sending success. The email was sent. And on my other screen, I'm receiving an email notification. Yeah, so that's how that works. Yeah, so this is the workflow that we just run. And here I can see one execution, one was it executed in the last time. Okay, before the next thing I want to show you, Andy, is what will happen on a problem. To understand from a problem was a workflow triggered. But before that, do you have any more question on how to configure the workflow?
No, I think that's good. Also, folks, we had sessions in the past about workflows in general, so you can also find the links to other videos on workflows. Obviously, there has been couple of cool improvements like the templates that we've just seen, but in general, we already have a couple of other videos. Other than that, I'm pretty solid. I think for me, what I learned is when you're creating one of these workflows, you want to make sure that you specify the correct filter, because you don't want to have all the problems, but only that are interesting for you, that you specify the right actor, because that specifies even what type of data you're allowed to see. And then obviously use the templates, because you should not need to always start from scratch. We have a lot of templates, as you said. More of them are coming as we speak. And yeah, no, that's all good.
Perfect. So one question that people will always will ask themselves is, how do I know I had a problem? What happened? Was a notification triggered? Was it successful? And for that, we have recently added that tile, the automation and remediation tile, on the problem card. So here, that's an example, and we see, for that specific problem, 3 different workflows were triggered, all linked to ServiceNow integration. So of course, ServiceNow is also an interesting topic for the whole area of notification. And we can see, okay, one was the last execution of that workflow for that problem. Because if you have selected the workflow to be triggered when the problem starts and the problem ends, then the same workflow will be triggered twice for the same problem. So we show you the date of the last execution, and we show you the state. And this is very helpful, because you can see always, okay, was the notification, is it working? Was it received? Was a notification, or is nothing happening? Then you know, oh, maybe I should set something up for the problems that are interesting to you.
Yeah, that's really cool. And especially, as you said, more and more we see organizations leveraging this for not just simple notifications, but automation, remediation, prevention, right? Preventing a problem from having a bigger impact. And this is great. I know we're doing another session later on, but it's really cool that we see this directly now in the problem screen, because behind the scenes, I think it is querying the workflow executions, those workflows that are executed based on this particular problem. And in your overview slide, I think you also said, and you showed all the DQL queries. So that's why I really love that slide that you had earlier. It explains everything.
Yeah. I was also thinking, let's bring it back for the end, because I'm done with the product part. So this is what we were talking about. As a summary, what we have seen, we have those configuration alerts that generate Davis events, and you can look at them in DQL using DT Davis events. They are grouped together in a very smart and automatic way into problems, so that you don't get overwhelmed, and also with more context added, like the root cause detection and more useful information. And of course, you see everything in the problem app, but you can also query that into DT Davis problems. And then you use a workflow with the problem trigger to select which problem you are interested in, the problem that are related to things that you work on, that your team cares about. And the workflow do stuff, sending a notification or being more complex a response to your problem. And here, the parts that you were referring to is all those information, what's happening with the workflow, is also logged into Grail, and this would be the way to get them. Fetch DT system events is a system events from the automation engine, and one event type would be the workflow execution that gives you the highlights, and then you can go much deeper. You can go to task execution, so you have really lots of data to also help you understand what happened, and if something goes wrong, what goes wrong.
Awesome.
Now, there is one thing that we have been looking at only the problem trigger, and I would say that's the most important one. So when you start automating problem trigger really makes sense. There are some cases where you might want to notify or automatically respond to specific alerts. And I wanted to briefly explain. So if we go back to same graph, just a bit different, we have those Davis events, the alert instances. And maybe you have a very, very specific alert instance. For example, disk is starting to be full, and you want, or something like storage capacity management. So it's more like a warning, and not yet a problem. Something if you want to go more on the proactive side and less reactive, you could have some events that detect those things, and you could say, okay, when that specific event is raised, then I want a workflow to automatically increase my capacity, for example. And in that case, that might be more interesting for you to use to trigger directly on Davis events, not on problems. So we have another trigger in the workflow that is called Davis events, and where you can select which events you are interested into.
I also think this perfect examples what you said, right? You want to react to certain things right away. Coming back to the example I brought up earlier, I see a lot of development teams that say, if this particular critical exception has been thrown, logged into a log file, then I want to get immediately notified or something like that. Or if they are exposing a certain Prometheus metric or any type of metric, and on that metric, I definitely want to immediately get notified. This is perfect explanation and great visual again.
Great. I have two last slides before we close. So again, a reminder that the first step when you are setting alerts and notification is, of course, the notification. Make sure the issue is visible. It gets to the team on Slack, email, or through ServiceNow. But the real magic in of work is, of course, in automation and in intelligent automation. So we see different kind of level into the automation maturity that team go through. And the first step is the notification. And that's why we created a simple workflow to not have to think about licensing workflow. As soon as it starts getting more complex, we go towards standard workflow with more than one task. And there is a licensing implication. But there's also more value into it, so that makes sense. And the first step would be, for example, enriching problem context. So we see teams that automatically create Jira tickets for problems, but first then do some enrichment, look at the data from here, and that bring all together to make sure that the Jira ticket already has all the information that the team needs to act on it. And we can go step by step into more automated remediation and resolution, and then even more intelligent automation. And speaking about intelligent automation, I just wanted to tease the example from our colleague working on the Dynatrace Intelligence app. There is a preview for the Agentic workflows. So when you have that app, the Dynatrace Intelligence app installed, the one that is in preview, it will also install lots of workflow templates, Agentic workflow templates that you can select and get started with.
Cool. And we'll make sure that we put the link to the preview program in case you're watching this and it's not yet GA and the preview is still active. Just check it out. Great. I've played around with the Kubernetes troubleshooting agent, which is really cool. So when a problem comes in on Kubernetes, it automatically enriches the problem with more information about potential root cause, how to fix it, remediation actions. It's really, really great what you guys have built here. Awesome. Hey, Sonia, thank you so much for giving us this overview. I know I said it before, but I said it again. Your one slide with that overview from how Dynatrace detects these events, how they become alerts, how they get kind of put into problems, and then how this can trigger workflows, for me, really puts it into a single picture. Thank you for walking us through all of this. And well, I have you back, obviously, for more of the standard workflows that we can use. So,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.